Hello everyone, this video was created to help you prepare for our lesson tomorrow on analysing propaganda through posters. Countries during World War I disseminated a lot of propaganda through posters, and that's why we're going to spend an entire lesson pulling apart posters and analysing the different elements within them. So moving on. On this slide I have outlined exactly where we're up to in the syllabus and what outcomes will be assessed on for this lesson. So we are studying the shaping of the modern world, topic 5, World War I, and we're focusing on propaganda in World War I. The outcome that we're going to be assessed on is going to be analyzes and interprets different types of sources for evidence to support a historical account or argument. So the sources that we'll be analyzing would be the posters, and we can use them to support a historical account or argument. On slide 3, I have a bit of background information on World War I, which officially began in 1914 after the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand and lasted all the way up till 1918, a lot longer than most people expected it to last. The war was fought between two major groups. One was the Central Powers, which included the following countries: Austria-Hungary, Bulgaria, Ottoman Empire, and Germany. The other was the Allied power, including the following countries: Great Britain, France, Russia, Italy, Romania, Japan, and the US. What made the war unique was that it was considered the first modern war because it used new military technology such as machine guns, tanks, aerial combat, and radio communication. By the end of the war, approximately 16 million people had lost their lives. I hope this little recap will help you understand the context of the propaganda posters that we'll be looking at. So let's define propaganda. Propaganda is basically information, especially of a biased or misleading nature, which is used to promote a political cause or point of view. So as we move on and look at posters, keep in mind that posters do have ulterior motives and cannot be taken at face value. Before we move on, I'd also like to look at the difference between primary and secondary sources. So primary sources include documents or artifacts created by a witness to or participant in an event, whereas secondary sources are sources that are created by someone who did not experience firsthand or participate in the events or conditions you're researching. Thus, it should be obvious that the posters we'll be looking at today should fall into the primary sources category. Now looking at usefulness versus reliability, a source is useful if it answers your question or helps answer your question. It all depends on the question that you are asking of the source. Therefore, different sources can be useful to different historians asking different kinds of questions. So you need to decide whether a source is useful to you or not. The reliability of a source depends upon its origin and purpose. Do you know where the sources come from? Can you trust the information that it gives you? Basically, is it something credible, or is it something that you believe is not credible and has an ulterior motive or isn't very clear? Moving on, pulling apart a poster. So a really good way to learn how to analyze posters is to first pull them apart and start to annotate them. There are different elements to a poster. There is the graphic element, perhaps pictures and the colors used, things like that. And then there's also the written element. Some posters have written words, slogans, things like that. So let's look at this image right here. We can clearly see that the salient image, which is the major drawing point of the image, is the soldier sitting on the leopard. The addition of the leopard shows that the soldier is in a position of power. He obviously is enjoying the wild side of life. He is somebody brave and daring. Considering the layout, the point of view, we can see that when we look at this poster, we are looking up at the soldier because he's on a higher platform. Even the slant of the leopard and the way it's jumping makes us look up, puts him at a higher position, makes us look up at him. So he is someone to be looked up to. Moving on, the body language. The body language of the soldier, he is casually sitting on this leopard, showing that he is not afraid, showing that he's very daring, and he's very comfortable in this position. He's almost challenging the viewer. The symbolism in this image, well, a leopard is obviously symbolic of danger, and him sitting atop a leopard shows that he is a daring and courageous man. The written element, so let's look at what it says. Travel, adventure. Answer, join the Marines. So it's basically sort of shouting at the reader, travel, adventure, join the Marines. It's kind of trying to pump up the reader, pump up the young men that could enlist to war. It is appealing to a young man's sense of adventure, to make something of themselves, to gain status. And even the fact that the soldier is sitting atop this leopard, it shows that he has status, because anytime a human being is depicted upon an animal that is predatory, it shows that they have dominated the animal. And so this domination shows that he has a higher status. So this poster would be appealing to soldiers, to would-be soldiers who have not yet enlisted, and appealing to them by saying, come join the Marines, come get some adventure in your life and gain status. So the language, as we just talked about, is trying to persuade the reader by challenging them, challenging the audience. Looking at the background of this poster, who created the poster and when. So the artist J.M. Flagg created the poster, and he created it in 1917, so 1 year before the war ends, and this poster was put out to encourage men to enlist and join the war effort. The poster was created for, as I just said, the war effort to get men to enlist, and what was happening in society during that time, and is it reflected in the poster? Yes, America is part of the war, and it needs men to enlist and join the war effort and hopefully win the war. All right, moving on. There's two different frameworks that I will discuss with you guys to analyze posters. The first one is Yom Kippur, which is, if we go through it, origin. What is the origin of the source? What is the motive of the source? Motive behind the source, why was it created? The content in the source. So as we looked at the poster, the content included a soldier on top of a leopard. The audience, who is the intended audience of the source. So the source that we were looking at before, the intended audience was young men who need to enlist. Perspective, what perspective is presented in the source? How useful is it? Is it actually answering the question that you're asking of it? Is it reliable? Can you believe it? Are posters really reliable? You've got to ask yourself these questions when you're looking at primary sources. All right, the next slide. I've actually done an example for you. I've shown you how you will actually be analyzing posters. So this poster is a German poster, therefore the German writing. The summary of this poster is basically that it's showing a black eagle, which is the national bird of Germany, diving after bullet-ridden, badly damaged British biplane, which is plunging to earth. The text announces under the title, now for a short time only, an exhibition of spoils from the air war campaign. Location, hours, price of admission, and other details are also given. So this is obviously propaganda on the home front. It's there to appeal to people on the home front. And actually, the thing about German war propaganda is that it was so strong that when Germany ultimately lost the war, people felt betrayed because the reality of the situation and the German propaganda was so far apart. So let's use the framework, the origin. So Max Mandel in 1915 created this poster. The motive of this poster is to raise money for the war effort. The content is the black eagle, as we discussed, the national bird of Germany, diving after a damaged British biplane. The audience for this poster, as we discussed, the German people on the home front. The perspective, well, it's clearly giving a German perspective of the war, depicting Germany as empowered against the disempowered British, showing that Germany is actually doing quite well in the war. The usefulness, this poster would be useful to a historian studying German propaganda during the Great War, or a topic similar. Reliability, this source is not reliable as it sports a German bias and was created for the specific purpose of maintaining morale at the home front and raising money for the war effort. The poster does not necessarily reflect the reality of war. Those spoils of war could have been exhibited. Moving on, the other framework that we will be using is Adamant. So Adamant is basically author, who created the source, date, when was the source created or published, audience, who was the source created for, what message is it giving, agenda, does the source have a bias, nature, what type of sources the sources that we've been analyzing are all posters, and technique, what technique does it use? So could it be the color, what's the color palette being used? Is it red? Is it firing people up? Is it blue? Is it calm? Things like that. Moving on, here's something that I've analyzed using the Adamant framework. So this is a wall poster, a very famous one, with the phrase, "I want you," for the US Army, showing Uncle Sam, who's basically a national figure, pointing his finger at the viewer in order to recruit soldiers for the American Army during World War I. The printed phrase, "Nearest recruiting station," has a blank space below to add the address for enlisting. So once again, the author, J.M. Flagg, date 1917, audience, potential recruits, message, Uncle Sam, national figure, asking the male population to join the army to fight in the Great War, agenda, to appeal to men's sense of responsibility to help fight for the country. And you can tell that because he's pointing. So the nature, it is in fact a poster, so not a news article or anything of that sort. It's a poster. That's how you identify the nature of the source. Technique, the salient image of Uncle Sam with direct gaze and pointing finger. When somebody looks at this, they would feel like the poster is speaking to them. So that's how men were sort of almost guilt-tripped into joining the war, feeling that sense of responsibility. Moving on, okay, so we've come to the end of this video. I've put a brief checklist just to make sure that you know how if you have actually covered the elements that you need to learn through this video and the elements that you're going to have to use in lesson 1 tomorrow. You should know the definition of propaganda. You should know the difference between primary and secondary sources. You should know what the usefulness and reliability means in relation to a source. You should know how to decipher the graphic and written elements of a poster and how it relates to its context. You should be able to use the Om Kippur and Adamant frameworks to extract information from posters. All right, so that's it for now. I will give you more instructions on how to use the the information that we just discussed in tomorrow's lesson. Thank you.